promise to the Lord, then take it to the grave. Listen to the wise man, tell me what he say. Listen to your heartbeat like it still bleed. A little bit of hope, yeah, it's what we still need. Say a little prayer for the moment. Give what you got, just go in. Can't hold you back if you own it. Live your life like it's chosen. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find it, you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Know what I need, I know what I need. You find the keys,
Chasing love in an empty bar. Pour a drink till I make it past. The midnight hour seems to come and go, but I know. Walk on up with a drink in hand, sipping mixers cause you can. And all the lights begin to switch off. You're chasing the night, holding on for life, fading out, chasing the night, chasing the night, chasing the night, chasing the night, holding on for holding on for life, feeding the high, chasing the night, chasing the night. Hotel rooms and city squares, champagne bottles, drum and snare. The sights and cities seem to fall away when you stay. Locked in love for a night or two, losing sleep just to get off you. Day to day you wanna stay out. You're chasing the night, holding on for life, fading out, chasing the night, chasing the night, chasing the night, chasing the night, holding on for life, feeding the high, chasing the night, chasing the night.
We're living for the moment now, we're one with the world. I can't lose this feeling I get. My heart's in the right place, and so is my soul, yeah. I won't take no excuses for it. I want it, love it, need it, live it. I feel like like something's missing when I do not have it. I feel it in my bones, gotta find my space. These emotions on my face, taking a toll, I gotta pay it forward. I'll give it all that I can. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. Yeah. No what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe, you live and you breathe, you'll find the key. Lifting me, lifting you. Can't go alone, let's do by two. Doing this together, it's me by you. All through the night, all through the night. This is me, this is you. When we get together, we can all pull through. I don't ever ever wanna stop this groove. Let's get it right. Take it to the Lord, then take it to the grave. Listen to the wise man, tell me what he say. Listen to your heartbeat like it still bleed. A little bit of hope, yeah, it's what we still need. Say a little prayer for the moment. Give what you got, just go in. Can't hold you back if you own it. Live your life like a chosen. No matter what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take no for an answer. If it don't hurt me, it makes me stronger. Yeah, no what, I won't let up. It's in my soul, it's in my blood, and I won't take it no more. I won't be there. Just leave it to me. I know what I need. You'll find if you see. And if you believe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to round 2 of the RCI Porsche Cup Season 2 here at a very, very damp Hungaroring. My name is Ryan Gill. I will be your lead host for this evening, and joining me in the commentary box is not the Porsche-loving George Smith. In fact, he is busy this evening. So alongside me, I have one of our new commentators who you may have heard around here before lately. It's Simon Huber. How are you doing tonight, Simon?
Well, thanks very much for that warm introduction, and yeah, just to echo your sentiments, welcome along everybody, welcome along to what is sure to be an interesting race. We've got damp conditions, we've got Porsche Cup cars, and we've got the tight and technical Hungaroring. Really looking forward to this one, definitely.
Yeah, we haven't given the drivers an easy time, have we? We started the season off at Zolder, and of course Zolder wasn't really that easy for a lot of these guys, and of course now we've come to the Hungaroring, and of course another tight technical circuit, and to add it on, we've got some damp conditions as well. So, as we come towards the end of practice, you can see that Jesperi Hilacalio leads the way, not Mike Noble, funny enough. He was dominating practice up until Jesperi Hilacalio managed to go 6/10 quicker. So will Mike Noble have an easy time out this time at the Hungaroring? Well, we're going to have to see. We do also have some of the other names that unfortunately had to miss out last weekend. Martin Lawrence, Jarkko Torvinen, and Gergo Panka all present as well, and plenty of other names that you are all very, very familiar with. Giacomo Peretti, Alessandro Porter, Bart Matcher, Quade Claessens, Mikael Sundström, the list goes on. But as we come to the end of practice, it's going to be interesting to see what these guys can do coming into qualifying. 151.7 is the quickest time out in these conditions at the moment. And I have to say, Simon, I mean, I'm not too experienced with the Porsche Cup car myself after... Well, I've commentated on plenty of Porsche Cup races, but I don't really dabble with the car too much myself. 151.7 in these conditions is quite quick.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty impressive time. In anticipation of tonight's action, I decided to take a Porsche Cup car for a spin around Hungaroring, and I gave myself much better weather conditions than what these guys are experiencing now. And I can tell you that my very amateur times were about a 1 minute 53. I had an awful lot of trouble getting the car around the track, and I think that comes down to in part the nature of the car in combination with the track. You've got a lot of switchback turns, a lot of tight turns, and obviously with the Porsche being a rear engine car, you've got all that heavy mass hanging out the back of the car, and yeah, it acts a bit like a bit of a pendulum sometimes. I mean, it's quite fun. You can get a bit of a drift on, and you can sort of control that. But one thing I noticed doing that was it's very easy to overheat your rear tyres, and once they've started to overheat, it's a bit of a downward spiral with those guys, and then obviously you're fighting for traction at the back of the car, and it's a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to be really, really intrigued to see how these guys manage this at such a pace around the circuit.
Yeah, of course, with these cars, you've got to be so careful around this kind of circuit. No traction control on these cars, of course. They do have ABS, and they'll be taking advantage of that ABS as much as they can in these kind of conditions. But practice is coming to an end. I think we're just waiting for one more car to come around the circuit. I believe it is Jan Matthias who's on the final flying lap of practice. And then we'll be moving into qualifying fairly shortly.
So I wonder what's going through the drivers' minds now, really. Have they got their cars dialed in? Are they happy with the setup in terms of the weather condition and the track? Obviously, only time's going to tell with that. But I would imagine that there's a fair amount of trepidation. As you said, there's no traction control with these cars, which is going to make them fairly loose around a circuit like this. The ABS obviously is going to work in their advantage to a certain degree, but I still think with the slippery track and the tight nature of the circuit, they're going to have to be careful. One other thing I would say is quite advantageous with this track as opposed to maybe the likes of Brands Hatch or Laguna Seca, someone like that, is there is quite a lot of runoff areas, so you're not going to be punished too heavily for making a mistake, but it is going to cost you in time, and at the end of the day, that's what these guys are fighting against.
So into qualifying we go, and well, something that should be fairly obvious to a lot of people coming straight into qualifying is that there's no rain here, and we do have a dry qualifying session, as you can see through the weather forecast as well. Some clouds in the sky, but it is nice and sunny out here. So a lot of these guys practicing in the wet, they've now come into a dry qualifying. We don't know what conditions the race will be in. It's highly likely it'll be wet, but well, considering the way that qualifying has panned out here, it's looking to be dry for the moment, but we'll continue on with everything as it goes right now. We're on board with Mike Noble, of course, our winner from round one. Absolutely dominant performance. George Smith described it as disgustingly good from Mike Noble last week, and I think you know, that's the kind of compliment that you can appreciate if you're someone like Mike Noble.
That certainly is an interesting way to describe what seems to be an imperious drive by Mike there. This weather condition, the switching weather condition, is really put the cat amongst the pigeons here, really, because they've got to qualify now, potentially with a setup that's not been optimised for a dry track. So they're going to be qualifying on a compromised setup, and I wonder how that's going to affect their times over the course of this session. I wonder if this is going to be a case of those guys that drive these cars that know them a little bit more intimately than perhaps some other people might do. That's definitely going to favour those guys for sure.
Well, Mike Noble begins the first lap of qualifying, and he thunders down towards turn 1 nice and late on the brakes, and will get through it nice and cleanly. Then comes up towards turn 1A, some interesting corner names here at the Hungaroring, and down towards turn 2. Very difficult corner to navigate, so long. Some of these corners feel like they take forever to get through, but he then will go through the fast right kink of turn 3. Don't go too wide on that section of tarmac, he will invalidate your lap. The rise up towards turn 4, fast left-hander. Touch the brakes just slightly. Don't go too wide again, or you will invalidate your lap. Mike Noble then hugs the inside line for turn 5, making his way up towards the chicane, turns 6 and 7. How committed is he? Completely committed over the entry, not too committed on the exit, but did mess up the lap either way, went onto the grass. And that'll be his first flying lap compromised, unfortunately, by Mike Noble. He will make his way through to start another flying lap in just a moment. But Mike Noble's first effort to put down a banker lap, not the best.
Yeah, and you've got to imagine that is a part of a product of the damp qualifying versus the damp FP practice versus the completely dry qualifying. They're probably running a sort of slightly, as I say, suboptimal settings for the car now, so they're kind of qualifying and practicing at the same time. I guess trying to work out what to do if the race does end up being dry, whilst at the same time trying to, as you say, be fully committed to try and score the ultimate lap time around this circuit now. And we're following Boardman. We've just switched to Bence, as I said that, just been caught out. And he's sporting a very bright, you're not going to lose that car in the dark, that's for sure. It's an excellent paint job. I really like that paint job as he comes down now into the very tight turn 1. Now, I've not done too many laps around this circuit, but from the laps that I've done, I sort of do understand that its patience is going to be the key with this circuit. I think with all the tight technical turns that it's got, there's a fair amount of undulation or elevation change rather in the circuit, and that in combination with the tight turns is going to reward the most patient of drivers. You know, you can't get on the gas too early, particularly with the lack of TC, because you're going to spin those tyres and consume the grip that you've got. And I think that's going to be one of the keys to the race today, is going to be managing the levels of grip that you've got at the back and not consuming those rear tyres too much. So I'm hoping that's going to keep the field bunched up together. I'm really, really excited to be commentating on this Porsche Cup race this evening.
And it was Jonathan Bence that set the first timed lap of the session, because I believe Andy Boardman had also invalidated his lap, but it is Jesperi Hilacalio that leads the way at the moment. He's on provisional pole, 147.6 from Jesperi Hilacalio so far, and of course he won the McLaren Masters Cup GT4 category for the pros, and looking to continue on with some success in the Monday night series in the Porsche Cup here as well. He was the fastest driver in practice in those damp conditions, so of course understandable that when coming through into qualifying he'd try and carry that pace over, and he's doing well at the moment. But Mike Noble, he's going to go 1 second quicker, 146.6 from the championship leader. And it seems that in the dry conditions, Mike Noble definitely does seem to have the edge over Jesperi Hilacalio, but Hilacalio 7/10 up on his lap at the moment, will come through the final corner and will try to dethrone Mike Noble, but he won't get close enough. I don't believe he'll be, yes, just about 2/10 behind Mike Noble. Alexander Guglia also getting within a second of the pole sitter as well. So Mike Noble continuing on with some of that incredible display of qualifying performance, and we expect to see that carry over into the race as well.
Yeah, seeing quite a few drivers now banging in the 147s, so they're sort of trading tenths there. Should prove to be good for the race. I'm hoping that we get a few guys bunching up together and sort of having the fight all race long. Obviously, this race being an hour long, there is a mandatory pit stop with a minimum on intake of fuel of 1 litre. So we've got the car set up, we've got the driving acumen, and we've also got the strategy element to this, which is going to prove to be excellent, I think. As we're following around Guglia, I probably murdered his surname, so I do apologise if I've got that wrong, in the sort of semi-matte grey and goldy coloured Porsche there. He's looking fairly committed on his lap here. He's currently in position 3 with a best time of a 1:47.301, but he's already 3 tenths up now, so whether he can maintain that round for the rest of the lap as he's coming into the very tricky final section of the lap here, so he's just making his way through the downhill right hand there up to the penultimate hairpin, and this corner in particular just feels like it goes on forever. You feel like you've come to the exit of the turn and you're only about 2/3 of the way around, and if you're not careful you can find yourself heading up pit road, which is not where you want to be if you're on a flyer. I'm just having a look now on the timing screen, and he's still a tenth up at the last count. Has he improved on his time? So the 1:47.202, so he carried that tenth over the line, but it doesn't move him up any positions because the times are proving to be quite tight. Did he, in fact, actually, did he get that lap invalidated? Because the time is quicker than second place, but he's not moved up on the timing grid, so he must have had that lap invalidated.
I think it was definitely quicker, the lap that he'd set. Yeah, he did.
It's a 47.2. It's a 47.2. That was me having a bit of a dyslexic moment there. So my apologies for that.
Yeah, he set a 1:47.2, so he did improve on his lap time. But unfortunately, he did lose, I think, about 3 tenths in the penultimate corner, whilst you were saying how tricky that corner can be. I think Alexander Guglia giving quite a good display of how tricky it can be. He's got his teammate right behind him, or will be alongside him on the grid, if they finish as they are in qualifying at the moment. Of course, Mikael Sundström, one of the development staff here at RCI, and of course, one of the nearly on-pace drivers alongside Alexander Guglia and Joachim Svensson. I believe Joachim Svensson not here for this championship, unfortunately, but we do hope to see him back in the future as well. Mikael Sundström up by 3 tenths on his lap time at the moment as he comes into the final corner, but he's lost 3 tenths coming out of the penultimate corner, gains a couple of tenths back in the final corner, will lose a bit on the exit. He will improve up to 3rd in front of Alexander Guglia, but unfortunately he loses out on chance to go onto the front row. And Jesperi Hilakalia, by the way, has improved on his lap time, and he's only 1 tenth behind the likes of Mike Noble, who is currently 2 tenths up on his lap time.
That really is some incredible pace that Mike is finding as he's getting more and more dialed into this circuit. That could all be for naught if the race does prove to be wet. But to be honest with you, I'm hoping for a dry race for these guys. They're putting in some really impressive times. They're fully committed as we ride on board now with Mike Noble. And just look at the commitment coming into turn 12 there as he's coming up onto that real tricky left-hander that we were talking about just a moment ago, and doing a lot better job navigating this turn than I did earlier today. He's nicking a bit of the pit lane entrance, which is obviously the line there. He's waiting to find his late apex as he's making his way around the final turn. Does that invalidate his lap? I think he was just about okay. And he's done a 46.281. That's an impressive time.
So Mike Noble improves on his lap time again, 1:46.2. Goes even quicker than he was before, almost half a second over the likes of Jesperi Hilakalia at the moment. Ondrej Dedicek, in the meantime, sits down in 7th place provisionally at the moment, 1.1 seconds off of the pole sitter. He's currently 3 tenths of a second up on his lap, though. Comes out of the final corner. He's going to carry that pace up towards the line as well. And Ondrej Dedicek, he'll throw himself third onto the second row of the grid. The connection lost racing driver, proving that experience he had with the likes of James Parker in the Friday Endurance Championship is paying off. And he's finding himself even further up the grid than he was last week in qualifying. So doing well so far for Ondrej Dedicek. Surprising to me, though, is that the likes of Jarkko Torvinen and Gergo Panka struggling at the moment. Torvinen 6th and Gergo Panka all the way down in 13th, just in front of Matt Samuel. So a few of the FFS Racing guys struggling here indeed, but one man who isn't struggling is Mike Noble as he sits provisional pole sitter with just under 3 minutes to go.
So perhaps you can answer me this then, Ryan. What's your predictions for the race there? I mean, looking at the timing screen at the moment, we've got Mike Noble seemingly in a class of his own at the moment, with number 2 position just about half a second behind them. And then if you switch back to third place, between third place and 16th place, they're covered by less than a second. So we should be on for a pretty good battle in the midfield. But my concern is that with the pace that Mike Noble's showing at the moment, he's just going to walk away with this one.
I mean, that's kind of the idea that we had walking away from Zolder, was that, you know, if Jarkko Torvinen couldn't stand up to the likes of Mike Noble, then, well, Mike Noble could possibly run away with it. But Jesperi Hillikallio, he's giving him something to think about. Maybe not as quick in the dry, but of course, if we do switch back to those damp conditions, we've seen that Jesperi Hillikallio seems to have a bit of an edge in those conditions, and maybe want to put that to his advantage. Alessandro Porter has gone third, by the way, as well.
Yeah, I would say a track like this is, as most tracks are really, are a track of rhythm. So I think the best thing that Hillikallio could do to Mike is to try and disturb his rhythm, or try and stop him from getting into that rhythm early on in the race. You know, even if he doesn't put the pass in, if he sort of fakes a pass, or he just basically irritates Mike Noble and doesn't let him settle down, then potentially then we could be on for a bit more of a race. I mean, as you say, he is getting faster. He's on a 46.4 at the moment, so there is only now 2 tenths, so he is making improvements all the time. If we do get that damp, sorry, my mistake actually, that's not Hillikallio, that was Laurent. Although he had just been surpassed by Hillikallio, though, so I cannot actually keep up with what's going on the timing screen at the moment, such as the frenetic pace of the qualifying action that we're seeing in front of us now. But yeah, I think if any of these drivers can hassle Mike Noble, stop him from getting into that rhythm, we could be on for a hot battle at the front. As we're still on board now of Hillikallio, is making his way around the circuit in the distinctive silver and green livery Porsche. As he's just putting over to the side now, I think he's done and dusted as we make our way into the final 15 seconds or so of the qualifying session. We've got a few green indicators up on the timing tower, but I think we are pretty much settled now for our grid slots, certainly in the top portion of the field. So we've got the checker flag out now. We've got about a 5-minute wait time while we're waiting for the other cars to cross the line, and then we can get the race underway.
So as qualifying does come to an end, the timer expires. Mike Noble in the pit lane, Jesperi Hillikallio in the pit lane. Martin Lawrence, by the way, finally arrives, but he's not up on his lap time at the moment, so he won't be going any quicker. Alessandro Porter is a second down on his lap time as well, so I think the top 5 pretty much decided here, unless Peter Roche, who is currently a 10th up on his lap, third row of the grid.
As we're on board with Roche, he's making his way around now. He's potentially on for a better time. He was on a 47.0. He's currently 3 tenths up now as he comes back into that infamously tricky back part of the circuit. Let's see if he can hold it round, cross the line, see if he can carry that momentum forward, and maybe nick the place of Dedek. I can't pronounce his name, with number 6 man. If I try to pronounce his name, I would probably murder it. Let's see if he's carrying that momentum across the line now as he exits the final turn, crosses the line. Does he improve? he does improve. He's now qualified in
It's in P5.
P5, yes. Yeah, I just had to double check there to make sure that I wasn't going to make a mistake on that one either. So that was a really hot qualifying session. So we've got the top 6 in 146s, and the rest of the field was in 47s. That did tighten up towards the end. So, and of course, they've qualified in the dry. Now they're coming back to the race session, and we do indeed have some weather coming in now.
So, whilst we wait for the session to tick over properly, get ready to get underway, we'll have a quick look through the standings for the championship. Of course, they are fairly similar to what the standings were at the end of the first race. Mike Noble leads the championship with 63 points from Alexander Guglia, 53. Mikhail Sundstrom, of course, from the nearly on pace team, both of them in the top 3. Pascal Berber and Ondrej Dedicek in the top 5 with 46 and 43 points, respectively. Giacomo Peretti, Jesperi Helicalio, Peter Roche, Bart Matcher, and Andreas Keiferlein rounding out the top 10 in the championship as it stands. As for the second round, or the second page rather, Alessandro Porta from Racing Line Motorsport has Quade Claessens, Jake Boswell, Matt Samuel, and Wojciech Brigas alongside for the 10th to 15th place. David Gil, Sebastian Luigi Vita, Stephen Vust, Dustin Vust, and Daniele Flores will round out all the way down to 20th place. Then moving on to 21st, Jonathan Bentz, Panos Karatas, Marcus Stein, Jan Matthias, and Matteo Rector round out the point scorers. Of course, Nick Reinders, Jarko Torvinen, Cody Pride, Andy Boardman, Jan Saganowski, Martin Lawrence, and Gergo Panka, all without any points, as they failed to make an appearance in round 1.
So we've got a mandatory pit stop in this race. I must admit I didn't see the coverage of round 1, and I've not done much time in the GT3 Cup car. So I'm wondering whether an early stop strategy or a late stop strategy would favour these cars. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, with strategy, it's always interesting because I think a lot of it depends on if you encounter traffic, really. And, it's going to come across if you get stuck behind someone, especially, here at the Hungaroring, you're really going to want to pit and find yourself in some clear air, especially if you're quicker. But of course, it's all situational, of course, and you can't really just, make a guess so early on in the race. Of course, it doesn't matter when you pit, as long as you do pit before the end of the race, or you can't pit at the start of the race either. So it's all going to be very situational for these guys. And, we've seen pitting later on in the race benefit more than pitting earlier. But it's going to be interesting to see how all of these guys deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Mike Tyson once said, everybody's got a plan until the first punch is thrown. So, you can maybe try and say, well, I'm going to go early, I'm going to go late. But as you say, it's going to depend on traffic. And I think with this track, obviously, it's not a track I would say is completely one line, because we've got some hard braking areas followed by some quite tight turns. There is the opportunity to obviously outbrake people or mug people into turns, or get the undercut or whatever it might be, and that's all going to feed into the makeup of this race. And we're going to have to just sit and wait and watch and see what happens as it unfolds. But we've only got less than a minute now before they start out on their formation lap, and the tension here is really, really rising. We're just rolling in now to the 30 seconds before the cars make their way around on the formation lap, and I've got to imagine that they're probably sort of sat there trying to make sure, or trying to wonder whether they've dialed in the car exactly how they want. I mean, they have the advantage that the race conditions are similar to those that they had in free practice, so they should have a pretty good base setup now, but obviously that's going to have an impact on times. I've not done too many wet races with the new tyre model, and I'm wondering whether, because the slicks obviously take a little bit longer now to get up to temperature, and I'm wondering if that's going to be exaggerated a bit more even now that we're in the damp weather conditions. The cars are now making their way off the line to start their formation lap. Going to be trying to build as much heat into the tyres as possible, as I was just saying. And for me, that is definitely not weaving from side to side. I'm not entirely too sure that does anything for the tyre temperatures, but I'd be trying to get some heat into the brakes. Once you get the brakes warm, they'll start to heat up the suspension components and the wheels around it, and that's really what radiates into the tyres and gets the tyres warm. So that's imperative on this formation lap. As we're just following Mike Noble now, he's starting to lead the field out around the track. And looking at the weather forecast, we are going to have no break in the rain, and I think in the next 30 minutes actually it's going to get a little bit worse. I'm not entirely too sure that we're going to have a situation where we end up with a drying line around the circuit. It could be if the rain eases off, we might end up in that situation, and then that's going to completely throw everything out the window, because the drivers are then going to have to make the decision whether they come in earlier or later than they planned, and if they move to slicks or not. I think the challenge here is we've got 21 degrees track temperature, so it's not massively warm, and the challenge with a slick is, particularly in sort of semi-dry conditions, it's not necessarily about clearing the standing water off the circuit, it's about keeping the tyre temperature up so that the tyre can give you enough grips to carry on, and that is going to be the challenge for these drivers.
Well, as they come towards the end of their formation lap, we're going to be seeing them line up side by side to file as far as the eye can see. 23 cars here tonight. Actually 26, sorry. Only 23 showing up on my timing board, but I can see the rest of them now. So 26 cars, 13 rows. And we are getting ready to start the second race of the RCI Porsche Cup Season 2. Mike Noble on pole position, just as he was at Zolder. Jesperi Hilicalio alongside him on the front row of the grid. Martin Lawrence and Alexander Guglia on the second row. Peter Roche and Alessandro Porta on the third row. Dedicek, Sundstrom, Panka and Torvinen round out the top 10. But we are ready to go here at the Hungaroring for round 2 of the Porsche Cup.
Yeah, we've just got to keep our fingers crossed now that the drivers are sensible. They don't get a rush of blood to the head and try and win the race in the first turn on lap 1. I'm sure these guys are experienced enough not to do that, as we are green and we're making our way down into turn 1 now. This is going to be interesting. They're still very side by side as the grid fans out behind the leading trio. Mike Noble's got a clear lead into the turn, although he did take a little bit of a defensive line there, and I'm wondering whether he's just trying to stay off the maybe rubbered in part of the circuit, because that's going to offer him a bit more grip, or he was worried about getting mugged into turn 1. But look at the lead he's built up out of the first turn. It's incredible the pace that he's found straight from the very beginning of this race. As I suspected, he could run the risk of just running away with this race, but it looks like the guys behind him are still bunched up quite close together. They're all a little bit more cautious than Mike is. I wonder what Mike knows that these other guys don't.
Well, with the skill that Mike Noble has, it could just be down to the extended knowledge that he's got. Been a long-time driver for ACC and participated in some esports events as well. He knows his way around all of this. It was a fairly clean start. A couple of people getting caught up in a turn 1 accident, but no major pile-up at the start of the race. Very, very good to see. But Mike Noble, almost a 1 second lead from Martin Lawrence, who's managed to jump ahead of Jesperi Hilakalio from the start of the race. So Hilakalio, who worked so hard to get himself on the front row of the grid, has slipped down already, and that's Guglia off in the background. Alexander Guglia, second in the championship.
Oh, that's exactly what he didn't want. A hit like that in the barrier is going to at least hurt your feelings, at the very least, and at worst, that's going to maybe realign the car in a way that he doesn't want. That is an absolute shame for the beginning of the race there. He's going to have to regather himself up, hit the reset button, and then try and get on a damage limitation operation for the rest of this race now. As we're following, I think, the sort of front 5 cars as they exit round the final turn, as they make their way onto the start of their second lap. We're following Dededicek, is that how I pronounce that right? I've probably murdered his name as well. I'm not very good at surnames at the moment, unfortunately. I need to get up to speed with these drivers. But yeah, that's an impressive start from Mike Noble. He's got a 2.3 second lead now over Lawrence. We've got following Hilakalio now, as he's making his way around in that distinctive green and silver Porsche. I'm hoping now that everybody's gonna settle down into this race. We've got a spinner in the background. Oh, we've got a spinner in the background.
And that is Dedicek. That's Ondrej Dedicek in the connection lost Porsche. Has he lost it here? Ooh, lost it before he got to the curb. So coming through turn 3, and now he's found himself all the way back in the pack as well. So early problems for some of the guys that finished high up at the end of the first race, with the likes of Ondrej Dedicek and also the likes of Alexander Guglia coming into some individual errors early on. Got a big one there.
Did they collect? Sorry to cut you off there. We had a big accident there with cars spinning across the grass. Contact there. We're spinning across the grass now into the chicane. Is he going to collect anybody? I couldn't quite see. It looks like he's collected a couple of cars there. We've got some stranded cars on the side there as they're trying to sort themselves out now. That's a travesty, but I think it's going to be a feature of this race, really. And I think that's where Mike's, he's put the hammer down right from the very beginning. He's obviously got now a 4-second lead, which is incredible. And he should be racing a fairly undisturbed race. But where we've got the wet weather on these curbs and a lack of traction control on these cars, it is proving treacherous out there.
Yeah, of course, these cars hard to drive in the dry, never mind the wet. And by the way, if you were thinking that everything's a bit crazy right now, you can see up in the top right corner the weather forecast. In about 30 minutes time, the rain is going to get lighter, so it's going to start drying out a bit here at the Hungaroring. In the meantime, Jan Matthias down towards turn 1. He's just in front of Jake Boswell in the number 47. Of course, Jake Boswell, one of the chief stewards around here at RCI, getting involved in some racing as well. And I think that was Daniele Flores just up the road, or Giacomo Peretti, one of the two a bit off track. Meanwhile, Bart Matcher, another one of the connection lost racing cars, trying to recover whatever he can at this point as well, but still out in front. It is Mike Noble, 4.7 second lead over Jesperi Hilakalio, but Jesperi Hilakalio obviously taken back that second place from the likes of Martin Lawrence. He's going to have to see if he can try and close down the 1-2-3 at the moment, but Mike Noble looking pretty dominant so far in the wet. So my theory that Hilakalio had some form of advantage in the wet, pretty much gone now.
Yeah, it would seem so at this early stage. But then let's not forget, Mike could be potentially consuming his tyres more. That may play a feature later on in the race. And if we do get less rain, as this race develops, we could end up with a drying line on the circuit, and that really is going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of strategy. I mean, if that is the case, when do you come in for dry tyres? When are the slicks going to give you an advantage in lap time over the wet tyre shod cars? I guess time is going to tell with that, but Mike Noble did a 52.0 on his last lap, and Hilakalio did a 53.5, so that's 1.5 seconds advantage in one lap. So if Mike carries on like this, I don't think it's going to matter what the weather does. I think he's going to have the time to choose and do things at his own leisure. Fortunately for us, though, the midfield pack, they're still fighting it out fairly hard as they're trying to navigate their way around this tricky, tight circuit in these tricky weather conditions, and it is proving to be exciting racing.
So we are going to have a little bit of a replay here of turn 1 lap. Well, yep, turn 1 on lap 1, and a couple of people getting all out of shape towards the front. And I think that was Mikhail Sundström that was out of shape there as well. And yes, it is confirmed. He's all the way down in 17th place right now. So Mikhail Sundström, one of the podium finishers from last week, finding himself in a bit of a tricky situation after the first corner. And Alexander Guglia, of course, also finding himself in a bit of a tricky situation. And here we can see this is Ondrej Dedicek. There's Alexander Guglia. Ooh, collision. And then comes back across, does collect at least one car. And unfortunate, therefore, Alexander Guglia and Ondrej Dedicek to get caught up in that incident. But it does just show you how twitchy these cars are out here in these damp conditions. It just shows you how hard they are to drive with no traction control in the wet.
Yeah, quite often I kind of get envious watching other people drive around really nice, expensive race cars. But I've got to be honest with you, I'm quite glad that I'm sat here in the commentary box rather than behind the wheel of one of these, as you say, very, very tricky Porsche GT3 Cup cars. Obviously based on the road-going GT3 car with the 4-litre flat 6 in the back of it. I'm not entirely too sure what the Cup cars produce in terms of power, but it is definitely more than what is required with these conditions and the tyres they've got on them at the moment. But it is proving to be very dramatic to watch. There's lots of cars that are sort of sliding around all over the place. It's not just the lack of traction control, it is going to be getting the braking markers right. As the track evolves, those braking markers and the acceleration points and the reference points are going to change. And have we seen drivers there already as Stein moved across to the sort of lesser used part of the track to maybe try and cool their tyres off? So maybe these guys are already experienced that there's not a lot of standing water on the circuit and their tyres are starting to heat up now, which is, it's just going to play even further into this strategy game as to what you do. I mean, you could end up in a situation where you've still got rain falling out of the sky. As it gets another big siren coming out of a turn. You've got rain on the sky, you have to have your wipers on, but it's kind of more that mental rain than it is sort of adding to standing water on the circuit. And I think that type of weather condition and track condition really does sort the men out from the boys.
Yeah, Jan Matthias experiencing some issues there, and someone moving out of the way. Make sure he doesn't get too involved. Might be one of the cars that was involved in the early lap incidents, just trying to move out of the way as they get moved past. I don't think... Was that Andy Boardman? I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. So one of the back markers there, I believe, might have been Wust. Yes, it was. Number 45, Dustin Wust, just moving out of the way for the likes of Jan Matthias and co. as they move along. And by the way, guys, we do have live stewarding here today, as we do for most of our championships. And of course, they've been hard at work already looking into some of the incidents on the opening few laps to make sure that the correct drivers are penalized for incidents that they are found guilty of. And the first one to go into the guilty book, well, it's the number 555, Marcus Stein. Lap 2, turn 1, involved an incident with car number 69, and 69 was actually Andy Boardman. So Marcus Stein had an incident, punted the number 69 off the track, and as such, he's received a 15-second time penalty, which he'll have to serve at his mandatory pit stop.
Yeah, and I mean, no one likes to see races get decided on sort of external factors. You want to see all the action on the track, and you want to see what happens. But if you're going to make, everybody does make mistakes, and there might not be malice involved in it. But at the end of the day, each driver's got to look after their fellow competitors on circuit to try and keep the racing clean and fair, and also tight. And unfortunately, there he's had to pick up a 15-second penalty for taking out another competitor. So, in these matters, the steward's word is law in these, and you kind of have to sort of just respect their decision there. It is one of the features that, one of the better features we've got here at RCI is that we've got live stewarding on, which is fantastic. And we do thank them for their support during these races. They do a sterling job, and hats off to them.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job here at RCI, of course, and I myself have dabbled in the stewarding a bit, and I think a couple of times was enough for me, and I decided that I'd rather stick to commentary. It's a bit more it's just a bit more suited to me personally, and you know, you get to have some nice reputation with the drivers. Nobody likes the stewards, I've been hearing, but they do a phenomenal job. We appreciate all the work that they do, and we're looking at Martin Lawrence now, who has taken second place back from Jesperi Hilakalio. So these two trading places at the moment, and you can definitely see a lot of guys going over towards the wall, the pit wall, on the main straight. And of course, like you said, Simon, taking some unusual lines here, so
Yeah.
it could be something to do with the tires, and obviously trying to cool them down. Maybe they are overheating. The dry line starting to form on the track, a bit visible there now. And Daniele Flores from Racing Line Motorsport, he's going to get interested, and I think he's going to take 2 in 1 here. He is down into turn 2. The Racing Line Motorsport driver takes 2. I think that's 2 FFS Racing cars in one go right there from Daniele Flores. And, well, living up to the Racing Line Motorsport name, and, of course, a very, very experienced Porsche Cup driver as well.
Yeah, he was definitely not going to pass up on the opportunity to mug 2 people into the turn at the same time. Very impressive driving at very close quarters there. He sort of expertly navigated that turn as he just goes a little bit wide. I think he just got a little bit loose coming into the very tight chicane there. But yeah, I think, you know, you've got to try and sort of take your opportunities where you find them, really. And a lot of the time, particularly where you might have tricky weather conditions or you're on a circuit that sort of favours a more sort of one-line approach, really, it's not necessarily about sort of sending it up the inside, as we see a great example of someone sending it up the inside now. Mateus taking the inside line there. He gets loose on the curbs there, and as you're going to have to run down. But I think that car stepping out there is costing him momentum. You can have another go into this tight right-hander. He does not. He thinks better of it. But yeah, I was just sort of saying, I think sometimes, you know, you're just as well to sit behind the driver and just try and pressure them, just try and find the chinks in their armour. As we've got a car travelling the wrong way on the circuit now, as he's trying to turn around, that was very dangerous. I would have perhaps maybe waited a little bit there for the traffic to clear. That did look very, very precarious. I'm not entirely too sure how sort of legal that sort of manoeuvre was. I'm sure the stewards will be all over it. But as you said, Ryan, I think, I don't know if the drivers are coming down towards the wall to try and break toes down the start-finish straight or try and keep their tyres cool. In certain sections of the circuit, you can see, oh, that was very, very tight there as Matthias gets very late on the brakes there. We've got a spinner in front of him. It is chaos on this track. And I'm not too sure whether that's down to the damp conditions or whether the tyres are starting to overheat now, because we are definitely starting to see some drying lines in this circuit.
That was Quade Clarson's that had just spun earlier on, the South African, but we are going to get a replay of the incident that happened with the 555 and the number 69. And you can see here, just to say tags. And, yeah, a bit of a late move. And, of course, that will be a slam dunk from the stewards. Fairly obvious, that one, from our perspective, but not really an intentional, you know, incident, just a bit too late on the brakes, maybe misjudging it. And, of course, you know, it could so easily happen in these cars in these conditions, but good to see that we could see that replay. And, of course, Stewie here at RCI bringing us all the camera angles and the replays. Broadcaster for this evening, doing a fantastic job. We're looking at Sebastian Luigi Vita at the moment. And that was David Gil just in front. I'm not sure if it was a touch or if he just lost momentum. And now, is that a car trying to unlap himself? I think it is. That's Alexander Guglia, who is a lap down from Luigi Vita. And going a bit off track as well there, Guglia. So chaos everywhere, as you said, Simon. And, well, I kind of get the feeling that it's going to be, it's a race of attrition out there. It's just about survival right now. It's not about your raw pace, but someone who does have raw pace and is surviving the conditions at the moment is Mike Noble. 16.5 second lead currently after just about 16 minutes of the race. And, well, judging by the performance we saw at Zolder, I kind of get the feeling it's going to continue that way if he can keep this car under control.
Yeah, I think maybe we should have put him in one of the GT4 cars for this race. It might have kept him a little bit closer to the pack. I mean, that is a lead to build up. And as we got two cars spinning, well, one car spun and another car drove into the side of him. As you say, this is going to be a race of attrition completely. We're going to have to put that down to, I think, the track conditions, as we keep saying, are evolving all of the time. So the braking markers and everything else are just changing lap after lap. But yeah, Mike Noble now 18 seconds, and I think, obviously clearly today he's a cut above the rest of the other drivers. I mean, you don't build up a lead like that just based purely on luck. But I think where the other drivers are a bit closer on pace, they're having to fight with each other, and you're going to be driving in your mirrors. You're going to maybe miss your braking markers. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to slide around a lot. And I mean, Mike is working the wheel there as we're on board with him at the moment. So I wonder if his tyres are starting to sort of give up now. But it doesn't really matter for him. I mean, he can afford to lose quite a bit of time per lap now, and the race and his strategy is really for him to decide. He can do anything at his leisure now, such as his lead.
He could probably come in and get a new set of tyres if he wanted to when it comes round to his mandatory pit stop. But Mike Noble will carry on his way, and like you said, incredible so far from the 123 FFS Racing driver. Unfortunately, Andre Franke not participating in this league. Of course, Andre Franke is teammate for endurance races, but I'm sure that we'll see them here soon at the 3 hours of Imola, or even the 9 hours of Imola that we have happening here at RCI in the future. Of course, in December, we're stacked full of events, and you can learn more about those events at our Discord. Obviously, check the link in the description for that. And you can also check out our partners as well, RaceDepartment AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Next Level Racing for all your sim racing needs. We'll get on to some of the services that they can provide you later on in the stream, but David Jill has got the likes of Jonathan... Oh, that's not Jonathan Bentz, actually. No, that's Andy Boardman, who is making his way past. And Andy Boardman actually is... oh, no, that is Andy Boardman. Oh, no, it's Dustin Vuss, sorry, number 45. So Dustin Vuss being lapped by the likes of David Jill for the stop-and-go race team. Hopefully he won't have to serve a stop-and-go in this race. And a lot of people having pitted earlier in this race. I mean, look at how many green markers we have next to the numbers. A lot of these guys pitting early. I wonder if some of that is down to damage that they've sustained from self-inflicted accidents.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to imagine that it is, but I just don't think that's going to work out well for them. We've got, now looking on the weather forecast, we've got less rain in 10 minutes and less rain in 30 minutes. There's number 80, Gil, just takes a little trip out onto the grass there, just losing a bit of traction there. So, yeah, I think these guys that have pitted already, I'm going to be surprised if we don't start to see like a really dry line forming soon and the wet tyres just screaming enough, and people are going to have to move on to dry tyres, otherwise they're going to face not being competitive. As yet another car is on the grass facing the wrong way around. This really is proving tricky for the drivers for sure, as we're on board with Mateus now as he's crossing the line to start another lap, and again taking that line down by the wall there. We suspect it is to keep his tyres cool as that sort of dry line's forming around the circuit now. But yeah, I wonder if we're as we're on board, we're following now 163, just run wide. Is that the final turn? Oh, and he just gets on the power too early, tips the car in, and I can't quite see the number on the car that he hit, but that guy was a complete passenger, and he spun again.
That was one of the FFS Racing cars that he tagged. I wonder if that was Matt Samuel or Gergo Panker, as they're fairly far down the grid as well. And like you said, Panos Karatas spinning again. Meanwhile, Marcus Stein still has that 15-second penalty on him because he hasn't served his mandatory pit stop. A couple of people have also received penalties, but they have served their pit stops already, so they've already served their penalties, basically. As they were applied before they went into the pit lane. Mikael Sundstrom's just gone into the pit lane as well. I've noticed now the pit lane marker next to his delta there. So Mikael Sundstrom deciding to pit very early on as well here. Not even halfway through the race in the majority of the field.
Got another
getting
spinner.
their pit stops out of the way, and someone else has gone round. Was that Hilicalio, I wonder?
I think it was the silver and green. It was the 5060 Hilicalio. Is he just gets the tank stopper on, and you've got all that mass at the back of the car, and I think in these conditions, once it starts to rotate and then ping back the other way, you really are a passenger at that point, and I don't think there's a lot he could do about that.
Big news as well, by the way, Simon. Mike Noble's in the pit lane. Already, the race leader has decided to come in fairly early as well. He's seen the forecast, and he's not fazed by the fact that the rain's going to lighten up a bit here at the Hungaroring, and he's going to get himself in for his mandatory pit stop. And interestingly enough, he's stationary, which means he is switching tyres. A lot of these guys, obviously, I imagine, started on wet tyres and not on the dries. You can tell the difference between the wets and the dries because the wet tyres do not have Pirelli stickers on the side of them, whereas the dry tyres do. And of course, as you can see here, a couple of these guys just got those solid black tyres with a white band on them. So they're going to be running wets, but Mike Noble, he's come into the pit lane. He's served his mandatory pit stop. He's no longer in the lead of the race. But just like a lot of these guys, getting that pit stop out of the way nice and early. And, well, if the conditions are going to start to lighten up, Simon, they're clearly not that fazed by the weather at this point in time, to risk going further on those wet tyres. What do you think can be the reason, the motivation for getting a pit stop done and dusted this early?
I think you're just going to be taking a punt on the fact that the track is going to continue to dry, and at some point you're going to reach that crossover point where the wets just can't cut it anymore because you can't get them cool enough. I mean, you're looking at the cars now. There's not an awful lot of spray coming off them. They are trying to seek out the wetter parts of the track, and we're seeing the lighter grey tarmac come through now. So Mike's got to be banking on the fact that those wet tyres are just not going to cut it, and he's going to go even faster on the dry tyres. Now, the key to this is he's got to push on his outlap, and it's sort of contrary in terms of thought that you're on a wet track, you're on slick tyres, but you've got to push as hard as you can because you need to get the heat in the tyres. The problem's going to come is if he can't push and he can't generate the heat in the tyres, they're not going to give him the grip, and it's going to be a downward spiral. And even a driver of Mike Noble's caliber seemingly been able to put out sort of a 20-second lead in sort of a 15-20 minute stint of a race. He's even going to struggle if he can't get the heat in the tyres. So I think these next few laps are going to be critical for Mike. And he's obviously gambled that the track's going to come to him.
Mike Noble's teammate Jarkko Torvinen in the number 15 trying to make his way through. He's got the Racing Line Motorsport driver of Giacomo Peretti behind him. In front of him, rather, and behind him he's got Ondrej Dedicek of the Connection Lost Racing Team. Three names that we're very familiar here. And Mike Noble, by the way, he came out in 5th place after his pit stop, taking tyres, and Jarkko Torvinen got really, really close to the back of Giacomo Peretti. He couldn't quite have a move on the inside line. Ondrej Dedicek now going to have a look, but he's on the outside, and just look at that. There's no grip on that outside line there. You have to be on the racing line coming through some of these corners, or there's just going to be not enough grip to get the power down, especially if you're on those dry tyres that we talked about a lot of these guys switching over towards. And you've got to stick to that dry line. You've just got to hope that you'll have the pace to go past them on the straights. But that's the problem in a spec series, isn't it? That everyone's in the same car. It's just purely down to setup and driver skill at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does make for very, very interesting racing. And you raise a good point there about the line. So, for any of the drivers that have switched to slick tyres on a drying track, one of the issues there is, other than keeping the heat in the tyres, is trying to make moves past slower drivers. So if you've got a driver on wet tyres and they're sticking to the racing line and you're on slicks, there's going to be parts of the track which is still going to be damp, which means you need to move off the safe or safe-ish drying part of the track onto a damper part of the track in those slick tyres, and then you've got to potentially outbrake or get on the gas earlier than someone that's running those wet tyres. So it really is a tricky situation, and you really do need the weather gods to be sort of working in your favour in those regards, or you just need to be a driving god yourself to sort of manage those conditions. As we are following Torvin around now, as he's in a hot battle with Dedicek behind him and Priotti in front of him, the 191 car. I do apologise if I keep murdering people's names. But they are in a hot battle now. They look like that was going to be a very tight manoeuvre there for Dedicek behind him. He's looking like he's trying to get past, but Torvinen is just sort of resisting his advances at the moment, and I think this battle is going to rage on for a little while now.
So Jarkko Torvinen's pursuit of Giacomo Peretti continues, whilst Ondrej Dedicek and Jesperi Hillikallio follow in suit. It's going to be interesting to see where everyone does come out once all the mandatory pit stops are done. And speaking of mandatory pit stops, there's 3 more drivers in the pit lane: Marcus Stein, Jake Boswell, and David Gill as well, which means we've only got about 3 drivers left that haven't served their mandatory pit stop. So, you know, if we're lucky, everyone could get those mandatory pit stops out of the way before the halfway mark of the race. And of course, as you can see in the forecast, it is getting drier as well. The rain is going to be lightening up ever more as we come towards the end. And Ondrej Dedicek is off and he's having to go on the grass. He'll have to slow down, make sure he doesn't lose control of his car. Kept it well, but he has lost the place to Jesperi Hillikallio. Hillikallio will take that, so thank you very much. And you can stay behind me right now, but Ondrej Dedicek will have to get himself refocused for the rest of the race. Meanwhile, Jarkko Torvinen still trying to chase down Giacomo Peretti in the Racing Line Motorsport Porsche Cup.
I've just been keeping an eye on the timing screens there, and the Mike Noble's now up into 2nd place. And on his previous lap, partway around the lap, he was 7 tenths under his previous lap time. He's doing sort of 1:53s at the moment, where everybody else around him seems to be doing 56, 57. So if he has made the switch to slick tyres, they are proving to be faster, although not quite as fast as we saw obviously in the full dry conditions. There are other people on track doing 53s. Lawrence is doing 53s as well, so we could expect to see him moving up the field. But as we're talking, as I say, I'm just keeping an eye on the timing screen, and Mike Noble's half a second under his previous time, which was a 53.7. So we are expecting him to go quicker. So it looks like the gamble, or at least at this stage, is paying off for him. Despite the fact that we're still seeing rain on the screen, the track is certainly drying up. And if he's running those slicks, they are definitely working for him.
Jarkko Torvinen was having a look on the inside of Giacomo Peretti, but just couldn't find the gap to go for, and will have to tuck back in. And Vita has also come into the pit lane to serve his mandatory pit stop. It's just Andy Boardman who leads and Jonathan Bentz in 3rd that are still to serve that mandatory pit stop. Everyone taking tyres here, although tyres weren't mandatory for your pit stop criteria. I think the correct way to go is onto those slick tyres, and, well, a lot of the guys starting to prove it out there as well. The only problem is that if you're going to go onto those slick tyres, you better hope that you've got clean air in front of you to use them, or you end up like Jarkko Torvinen has right now, where you've got a slower car in front of you, but you just can't find a way past because there is no line. Oh, as Jarkko Torvinen gets all out of shape, and is this going to allow Hillikallio to get past? No, it's not.
Had a cheeky look.
Forces him to the outside.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how quickly your fortune can change. I mean, Torvinen didn't make much of a mistake there at all. He was maybe getting a little bit frustrated behind the 191 car in front of him. Maybe just got on the gas a little bit early and lit the back up, and that was enough for Hillikallio to be on him. And you know, that's all it's going to take for these drivers, and they're not going to need a second invitation. So the 191's gone really, really defensive now, and Torvinen trying to make his way around the outside of the car. Outside of this turn, which is obviously going to leave him on the inside to the final turn, but he lost all his drive. They've touched. I couldn't see the number on that car there, but he just got punted. It was a bit of a late dive up the inside.
It's Dedicek and Torvinen, and Ondrej Dedicek looks like he'll wait to allow Torvinen to go back past him. Here's Jan Matthias coming up towards the scene of the crime. But Jesperi Hillikallio and Quade Claessens are going to say thank you very much. Quade Claessens, a South African driver for ATK Racing. He's going to move himself up into 9th place. Says 10th on the standings at the moment. But we're reading 9th on the board. So Quade Claessens doing quite well. And here is Mike Noble taking the lead of the race back. Andy Boardman still has a mandatory pit stop to do. But Mike Noble doesn't care too much about that. He's quicker, and he's decided he's going to make an overtake. So a legitimate overtake that we can see here. But Andy Boardman, realistically and rather sensibly, not putting up too much of a fight.
Yeah, discretion, definitely the better part of valor there. I couldn't quite work out. Oh my lord, as we got another car outbraking himself coming into that chicane and touching Hilicalio then. That was Klassen's just outbraking himself there and getting it all wrong. And as we keep saying, we keep coming back to it, like the track is evolving and the drivers have got to evolve with it, and some are doing a better job of that than others at the moment. There are battles raging up and down the field every single lap. Everybody's scrapping for every single position, every single half-tenth of a second they're trying to make up. And yeah, as we were following around Samuel there, just lighting the back tyres up, coming out of turn 1, I believe that was, down now into turn 2. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You're gonna have to watch getting on the power too long and spinning those tyres up, because as I keep saying, it's just going to consume those tyres and it's going to be a downward spiral from there. I couldn't quite see whether Mike Noble had wet tyres or dry tyres. I couldn't quite see if he had Pirelli stickers on the side there. He may have changed his tyres, but gone onto wet tyres as a safer option. But I don't know. There doesn't look to be that much water on the track no more.
He's definitely on the dry tyres. He was stationary in pit lane for enough time to switch on to tyres. In fact, most people were stationary in pit lane for long enough to be on tyres, except I think Jonathan Bentz, actually. No, having looked at it, Jonathan Bentz is also on slick tyres. I think everyone's gone for a tyre change in this race. And, oh no, Jonathan Bentz started on slick tyres, actually. So, 10th place, Jonathan Bentz, the South African, another one that we have racing here tonight. He started on slick tyres and has carried them all the way through that dry period and didn't have to pit for new tyres, just had to take that 1 litre of fuel. So he saved himself about 27 seconds in the pit lane. But we'll just have to see, did he lose? How much time would he have lost taking those dry tyres, of course, in the early part of the race? Of course, sits 10th at the moment. Where did he qualify, though, Jonathan Bentz? I believe 21st, actually. So Jonathan Bentz has made a massive amount of places through a gamble of starting on slick tyres.
And not only was it the gamble of slick tyres, it's the gamble of trying to stay clean as everybody else was having their little spats and little crashes and stuff. Although his car is so he's in the red portion in the back of our shop just there. Yeah, sorry, I was getting confused with the 191 in front of him, which is looking a little bit second hand as the bonnet's flapping around in front of it as this battle rages on. I mean, Bentz has done very, very well there to take that gamble at the beginning of the race, and it is obviously working out for him. His car looks in good condition, and I think he's just picking off the places as he's watching his competitors battle hard and in some cases push each other off the track there. As Hilicalio now makes a move around the outside of Klassen's. Is that going to work? I don't think it is. He's lost all his driver's momentum, and Bentz, there you go. There's a perfect example of it. He's going to say, thank you very much. I didn't really need to do any work for that. Just needed for you to make a mistake, and I want to take that position now. So he moves back up into 9th place. Is he going to get another position potentially in the next few sequences of corners now? He's in a really good place to make a move on the 191 now.
Quade Claessen's taking the opportunity to get past Jesperi Hilicalio on that mistake, and now he's going to look to do the same with Giacomo Peretti. Jonathan Bentz, by the way, was apparently involved in an incident. We'll get you a replay for that particular incident here. And that's Alexander Guglia by the looks of it. And what's going to happen here with Jonathan Bentz and Guglia? So they come down towards turn 14, and it was just a bit of small contact, so not too much there. Of course, we did get a report of some contact, but nothing too serious. So back to the live action then, and Quade Claessen's starting to stalk down Giacomo Peretti. He's had about 4 different drivers right on the tail of his Porsche Cup car, but he hasn't allowed any of them through just yet. But will Quade Claessen's make himself the first to get past Giacomo Peretti from this little bit of a train? Ooh! Well saved from the South African to not lose it there. Jesperi Hilicalio had to take some avoiding action as well there. but you can just see how much quicker these guys are than Giacomo Peretti, the mistakes that they're making, and they're still right on the back end of the Italian.
Yeah, you've got to imagine they're getting a little bit frustrated now behind this car, trying to make the moves on him and trying to get past. And you can see, I mean, as I said, it makes for very dramatic racing. It's nothing better than, I think, than seeing a car coming sideways out of a turn, but it's not the quickest way around the circuit now. As again, the 124 gets so close to the 191 of Pirelli, and we've got to think it's only a matter of time now before either a mistake is made or the move is done.
Well, considering the conditions out there, a mistake is much more likely than an overtake. But I tell you what, we'll take an overtake at this stage in the race. 23 minutes to go almost. And it has been full of plenty of action. By the way, Andy Boardman still hasn't come in for his mandatory pit stop. His car has been in the wars a bit. But I tell you what, he's another driver that started on slick tyres at the start of the race, and Andy Boardman started in 11th place. He's running second at the moment, does still have to serve that mandatory pit stop, but with the kind of gap that he has to the likes of Martin Lawrence behind him, I reckon that if Andy Boardman can keep up the way he's going, he can probably come in, serve the mandatory pit stop, just take that 1 litre of fuel and possibly come back out, you know, maybe third or fourth place. That'd be a fantastic result for the likes of Andy Boardman. Meanwhile, Burgess under pressure here from David Gill. He's going to go on the outside, the number 80 Porsche, but there's no room and no grip out there for him. And meanwhile, I think that's Matt Samuel, is it, right behind them? He was listed as being in front of them, but I'm pretty sure he's behind them now. Yes, he is in 22nd place, and the timing screen will update for us in a second. So battles all around here, and some interesting strategies coming on from a couple of guys, Andy Boardman and Jonathan Bent, seeming to have made the right call to start on slick tyres.
Yeah, they certainly seem to have made their way up the field by taking that gamble, and the battles as such, it's really hard to keep up with who's battling who on screen. But it is fantastic to watch nonetheless, as Halicalio now gets past the maroon Porsche and makes another mistake. And again, the maroon Porsche now has spun. He's spun round. That's not going to get him further up there. But Halicalio also makes a mistake. So that three-way battle that we were following just a moment ago has devolved into madness, it seems, in only one turn there. Both cars seemingly getting on the throttle a little bit too early there and losing the traction that they needed to get out of that turn. And meanwhile, Priotti just says, thank you very much. I'm just going to carry on driving. And that's a really, really good example of a driver not buckling to the pressure. He had two cars hounding him for, quite a few laps there. And he just stuck to his guns, did his thing. And, the pressure swung back the other way as the guys behind him were trying to put the pressure on him. He said, no, thank you very much. And the pressure got to those guys, and unfortunately for them, they made the mistake and they've lost the time now.
Yeah, Giacomo Peretti holding on and benefiting from it as well. Quaid Claessens and Halicalio, both of them just going spinning in tandem, it seems. And now Ondrej Dedicek will look to try and get past the South African. The 124 has dropped to, well, he's kind of stayed in 9th place, actually, hasn't he? Didn't really lose any positions through that little bit of a spin. And, of course, we'll be now looking to try and pull away, catch up to the back of Halicalio, and hold off the likes of Ondrej Dedicek. How quickly things can change over the course of this race. 20 minutes to go. Mike Noble leads the way with a 14.7 second gap over the likes of Andy Boardman and Martin Lawrence rounding out the podium positions right now. The rest of the top 10, Bart Matcher, Peter Roche, Alessandro Porta, Giacomo Peretti, Jesperi Halicalio, Quaid Claessens, and the man on screen, Ondrej Dedicek. A few of the guys that started quite high up in the order, quite far down. I mean, Alexander Guglia and Mikael Sundstrom, both of them secured podiums in round one. Not going to be doing that here today, as some cars behind Jonathan Bent. I think that was Jan Matthias and Flores, and Jan Matthias has gone around. So what's happened here? Is this through contact? There was a tiny bit of contact there. Jan Matthias goes off onto the Astro, and that's just lost him all the grip.
That is good. That is going to cost you. That AstroTurf, when it gets wet, it just holds water, and there is absolutely no grip out there whatsoever. So, you know, that's a real fortunate place to be in. And the same mistake again, and we just see the cars touching their doors to door down the start finish straight. Both drivers were able to maintain that and didn't lose too much time because of it. But yeah, we've seen Porsches throwing various different shapes around this race circuit, not all entirely moving forwards. But it's made for some interesting racing, and as I keep saying, you know, the conditions are so tricky. I'm so glad that I'm sat here in the commentary box as opposed to being behind the wheels of one of these race cars, trying to do my best to move up the field as the battles rage on. We're following around Flores. Is that Bentz in front of him?
That is Jonathan Bentz. And Daniele Flores.
Sorry, he just made the move down the inside there, and he's got the job done, it would seem. So has Bentz lost a bit of forward momentum there?
Possibly so. Andy Boardman has come into the pit lane, by the way. Oh, and he's received a 30-second stop and go for speeding in the pit lane. Andy Boardman, who had done a fantastic job starting on those slick tyres, has come into the pit lane and he's sped, and that's given him a 30-second stop and go.
Well, I for one are glad we haven't got commentary to car communication, because I wouldn't like to hear the words that are coming out of his mouth now, as he's made a simple mistake, an avoidable mistake like that's going to cost him dear. Although that said, actually, Peretti is 56 seconds behind him. I know he's falling down the order there. I thought maybe he could get the job done and still sort of come out relatively close to where he was already, but I don't think he is. That has really cost him dear. And it's those simple mistakes that are in your gift to not make, you know, and it's just the simplest of things sometimes that can cost you what would have been a really, really good race result there for Boardman, as the bunch of guys, the traffic here is all bunched back up again now. Are they behind Peretti again? So Peretti is that Peretti in front of this train now? I think it is, and I think he's just being hassled the entire race, but I think the guy, he's just sat there, he's just doing his thing, and I wonder if he can resist the pressure again one more time.
Andy Boardman went spinning off in the background as well, and now Giacomo Peretti under pressure again. He's seen Hilicalio spin behind him. He's seen Gwen Klaassen spin behind them. Well, they're both right back behind him. And they've pulled Ondrej Dedicek along with them, and you can see how much pace they have in comparison to the Racing Line Motorsport Porsche. But they just don't have the ability to get past him at the moment. We've had a couple of retirees from this race, by the way. Panos Karatas and Wojciech Burgos have both retired from the race. Burgos was involved in an incident with David Gill. We'll get you a replay of that fairly shortly, but staying with the battle at the moment, Giacomo Peretti still defending from Jesperi Hilicalio, and he's going to try and do the exact same thing that he did last time. He's going to try and defend so hard against these guys and hope that they make a mistake, but Hilicalio on the inside line for one corner, it rotes up being to the outside of the next corner, and Ondrej Dedicek goes off as well, doesn't spin where there's no grip on the circuit, keeps it well held, and it is incredible.
Yeah, and so, you know, you got Hilicalio there. He thought he'd got the opportunity there to get it done up the inside of the left-hand turn of turn 2, I think it was. But because he was up the inside, he's running a tighter line, he got on the gas probably in his usual place, but just spanned the wheels up and lost his forward momentum. And this sort of thing keeps on happening behind Peretti. He's just doing his thing, and these guys are trying to work out how to get past him. They've tried the inside, they've tried the outside, but he seems impervious to their attempts and completely unflustered. I really wish I could drive with that type of consistency whilst in the face of such pressure. But the guys behind him, they seem to want to give this position away. It seems to be like, oh, I'm going to go for a spin now. After you, I'll follow you around for a bit. I'm going to spin now, or go off track or whatever. And yeah, Peretti, he just seems to be doing his thing. As Hilicalio does finally get it done up the inside. Although Peretti's going to be on the inside now for this turn, Hilicalio finally gets it done, or does he? There's no grip on the outside. It's finally, as when all said and done, Hilicalio finally got that path done now. and Peretti's going to have to tuck in behind him and see if he can do anything about it. But given the pace that these guys have had behind him, I'm not entirely too sure he's going to have any answers for him.
Giacomo Peretti, the defense is finally broken, and Jasper Hilakallio is the one to do it now. Quaid Claessens and Ondrej Dedicek are going to want to follow in suit, and I kind of just wonder if it'll be a chain effect now. Once one has got past, will he just start caving into the others, or will he tighten up that defense even more? Giacomo Peretti, of course, he's a Porsche Cup champion from Redline Motorsport, but not leading the championship at the moment. That's Mike Noble, and he's going to continue leading the championship with the dominant performance he's had out here today. Been absolutely faultless from him out in front. Meanwhile, Quaid Claessens, he's had a few faults in this race. Some of them his own doing, some of them most likely not. But something that is well within his control is his ability to get past Giacomo Peretti. He's going to be trying to do his best to make sure he does get past. He actually won a race in the rain. It was monsoon conditions at the McLaren Masters Cup round 1 that Quaid Claessens did pick up a victory. But of course, the McLaren 720S with its traction control and ABS is a very, very different car to the Porsche Cup. He's going to have a look at the inside line, but doesn't commit to it. Thinks better of it, and will tuck back in behind and focus on Dedicek.
Yeah, so I thought then for a second there, Peretti made a couple of mistakes after Hilakallio came through, and I thought, is this the tide turning now? Is this the mental fortitude has sort of left him a little bit? And he seems to have regathered himself up a bit, and it seems to sort of, normal service for him has resumed. He is, I think, probably rather than seeking the dry line, maybe he's trying to go a little bit defensive now into turn 1, as he is noticing he's getting this pressure now. As the battle rages on behind him, the 48 tries to take the outside, the 124 tries to dive up the inside. He's getting it every which way, but they're still not managing to get it done. But there seems to be a bit of a traffic jam forming behind him now, as this 3-way battle is going to become 4-way and soon 5-way battle. And in these conditions, with the with the race form that we've seen so far, this is either going to be Peretti driving off into, I would say, sunset, but I don't think we're going to see the day ball today. But he's going to be driving off into the rain cloud as these guys are pirouetting off into the scenery, perhaps, as this battle behind him rages.
Yeah, the battle continues onwards, and what a train it is now. Peretti, Claessens, Dedicek, Torvinen, and Stein has come onto the back of them as well, and at the rate they're going, I wouldn't be surprised if Gergo Panka joins the fun towards the end. You can see... I was just going to say, you can see on the conditions, it is still getting drier out here. It won't quite hit, fully dry before the end of the race, but... Ondrej Dedicek had a little bit of a look on Quaid Claessens, and he might have spooked the Porsche enough, and the South African's under pressure now. And I think Ondrej Dedicek is going to get the move done. Yes, he is. He'll have the inside line. Goes a bit wide, though. Bit of contact with Quaid Claessens, and that's going to allow Torvinen to get through. Marcus Stein will be on the outside line. Claessens gets his braking wrong. He touched Torvinen, but Dedicek has been spun around, and there goes Gergo Panka as well to boot. He's going to add himself into the train of cars that have spun out, and now a couple of cars also having to take avoiding action, slowing down. I think that's David Gill as well, having to avoid all the chaos there, and just an example of how quickly everything can just fall apart.
And I think Peretti, by the time he gets to the end of this race, he's probably going to turn around to him and say to himself that, I've never been in an accident, but I've seen a fair few in my rearview mirror. That is for sure. It has been chaos behind him. And, these little accidents are just bunching up now. And we've got, what have we got now? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-way battle potentially now behind him. These guys, really, what they want to be doing is sort of working together to try and sort of get themselves back up behind him, and then sort of remount another attack, because they are fast running out of time. I cannot believe it. We are now sub 10 minutes. We've got 9.5 minutes left of this race, and everybody's desperate to try and get what positions they can. But at this rate, these guys, you can't make any predictions, because as soon as one person makes a mistake, you've got 3 or 4 cars pouncing on them. And then those 3 or 4 cars, more often than not so far in this race, are ended up pirouetting off. And we've got some sort of fairly second-hand looking Porsches now.
We do indeed, and Andrzej Dedicek, he's going to be making his way through at the moment. There's a back marker to boot in there at the moment. I think that is Käferlein, it is. And he's just going to be moving out of the way, not going to want to get too involved in all of the action going on here. I think we've had a car off as well. David Gill has gone off in the number 80 Porsche, so he's had a bit of an accident on his own, I reckon. Maybe assisted as well, we're not too sure. But Jarkko Torvinen, he's got himself up into 11th place. Gergo Panka just ahead of him. So the FFS Racing boys that didn't do too well in qualifying, starting to do a bit better in the race. But Matt Samuel isn't having a good day for that team either, down in 18th place. Meanwhile, Quade Claessens, he's going to breeze past the likes of Jarkko Torvinen, and Andrzej Dedicek going to do the same.
Yeah, and you got to think to yourself that potentially, you know, had they been paying for the tyres and the fuel, you know, they might as well have skipped qualifying, because it's not really meant an awful lot. We've had people coming from the back of the grid to the front of the grid and then back again, and vice versa. And that's what you get, I suppose, when you sort of throw inclement weather at these guys. In these particular cars around a circuit like this, you know, you're always going to end up with a situation where it's going to be a war of attrition. As you said earlier, it's a survival mode engaged fully. That is, unless your name is Mike Noble, and in which case you're just going to ride off at the front of the field. He's got a 34-second gap now over Lawrence, who himself has got a very, very healthy gap over number 55 in 3rd place. The top of the field, sort of down to 5th place, looks like they're sort of fairly well spread out. But in the mid-pack, the battle rages on. We've got back markers involved. We've had every car pointing every which way, it would seem, during the course of this race. And as you say, the rain is holding off. I don't think we're going to get a fully dry track now, but you know, the tyres have got to be spent now. The drivers' concentrations have got to be dropping, and you know, it has been a hard race. And yeah, these guys, you know, wherever they finish, they deserve our praise, because it has been a tough one.
Definitely has been a tough one for all these guys out here, and Gergo Panka trying to make up places on Marcus Stein. Not going to be doing anything there, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Mike Noble, by the way, he's catching the train of Jarkko Torvinen, Quade Claessens, Daniele Flores, and Andrzej Dedicek. So he's lapped all the way up to 14th place at the moment. So the race leader closing in on this pack on screen right now.
To be honest, yeah, if I was him, I might be getting off the gas a little bit and leaving these guys to it, because it has been chaos in this battle, as it's still raging on now.
I think
he's got through already, isn't he?
I think for the future, we might need to take Mike Noble's ABS off his car as well. Just, you know, give him a bit more of a challenge, because at this rate, he's making this look easy. Everyone else is struggling in these conditions, and I'm sure it isn't easy for Mike Noble. But he's definitely making it look so. But when, you know, someone of Mike Noble's caliber, it's not entirely out of the question that you could put out such an incredible performance like this. Meanwhile, Daniele Flores struggling to make up places as well in the Racing Line Motorsport car. Of course, Giacomo Peretti and Alessandro Porta, the other Racing Line Motorsport Porsches, find themselves further up the grid. Porta in 5th, Peretti still holding himself in 7th place, and I think the gap that he has to the likes of Mikael Sundström will probably be enough for the end of the race. Meanwhile, all this pack here at the moment, well, it's anyone's guess as to which order they're going to finish in.
Or indeed, which direction they're going to finish in. So the battle is raging on, like you said, as we are now watching a replay, and it's probably going to be slight contact into this right-hander. Across the chicane. Oh, they bumped doors, the car spins round. That's pretty unlucky there. We've seen many a car bump doors, and both cars continue on their merry way, but unfortunately For that driver, for Gil, that wasn't to be the case, and he's running around now in 22nd place now. And I wonder if he's picked up a little bit of damage now, as that other Porsche just makes his way past him. And we're now back with Flores as we're in this mid-pack battle now. So we've got 4 minutes to go. I don't think this battle is going to abate before the line. I think it is going to run all the way there unless they punt each other off, as they just have done. Flores running into the back of the other Porsche there, and the bright yellow Porsche there getting tangled up in it. He's going to get himself back going now. I wonder how that's affected him now as the race goes on. We're back on with Panker in the 778 Porsche as he's making his way around behind the 555 car of Stein. You've got to think that Panker's got to be sat there. He's going to make a move on this guy before the time is out, get himself up well and truly into the top 10.
So Gergo Panker continues onwards, trying to get past Marcus Stein. Meanwhile, you saw the accident there between Daniele Flores and Quaid Claessens. I did also see Dustin Vust go spinning in the background. So plenty of guys finding it difficult even towards the end of the race. The track conditions have changed from damp to greasy now. So it is drying up, but Gergo Panker involved in an incident here with Marcus Stein. Going to be on the inside. Just going to tap the Porsche. Marcus Stein is going to go round. And Gergo Panker, he's ended up in front of Marcus Stein and he's carried on. So I'm willing to bet that there's probably going to be a steward's inquiry into that and probably a penalty coming out for the likes of Gergo Panker. Meanwhile, Ondrej Dedicek moves over for the race leader, Mike Noble. He comes over to start what looks to be the penultimate lap of the race. Could be the last lap of the race if Mike Noble decides to slow down and take it at GT4 lap speed. But we'll have to see if he plans on doing one lap further. But you can't really say anything else, but it's been a sublime race, or, well, for him at least. And as George Smith would say, disgustingly good.
Yeah, absolutely. An imperious drive, a masterclass of how to drive one of these cars around this really tight, nadgery, twitty circuit. As he's coming up on a Porsche facing entirely the wrong way on the circuit there. That is incredible. I've never seen such sights before in racing before now. I definitely would have panicked quite a lot having seen a car facing the wrong way coming towards me at a fair rate of knots. Oh, wow, that was a punt. That was a big hit. That was a very big hit, and I can't even see why that happened, really.
Jarkko Torvinen had to slow down because of David Gill's stranded car in the middle of the road, and Marcus Stein didn't quite see that, and obviously didn't react in time, went into the back of Torvinen. Hasn't gained the place, I don't believe, because Torvinen, he did go off track, but he didn't lose any places, so Marcus Stein didn't really gain anything out of that, so don't think there'll be a penalty coming his way for that, but just shows you out there the kind of conditions that even if you're slowing down to avoid an incident, you're not safe, and there's always the chance that you could get caught up in an accident you'd never planned to get caught up in.
And a lot of these Porsches now looking like they've got panels from the Land Rover Defender company. They come up pre-rippled, and they're looking very, very second-hand now, but I would probably still like to have one in my garage, even if it looks like some of the Porsches out here now. And I was thinking actually that maybe next time for the next race, if we could maybe tap up the devs of ACC and see if we can get like maybe a Seat Cupra modelled for Mike Noble, and everybody else can drive Porsches. That might even the scales a little bit. What do you think?
I think definitely enough to try and level the scales a bit, but given Mike Noble's ability, I wouldn't put it out of the question that he could be competitive in anything around here. We could probably try putting him on a lawnmower, see how he does around here, but absolutely imperious drive. Meanwhile, I did say that I thought Giacomo Peretti's gap would be enough to keep him safe from Mikael Sundström. Well, Mikael Sundström's on the back of Giacomo Peretti, and it seems I was wrong about that. Of course, these guys are actually ahead of Mike Noble on the track, so they're not going to be finishing the race on this lap. Mike Noble has started the last lap of the race, but they're ahead of him, of course, so they're going to be doing one more lap. 5-second penalty given to the 1-2-4 of Quaid Claessens. Mikael Sundstrom going to try and go around the outside, not going to have the grip there, though. Tries to go for a little bit of a switchback here. And is he going to have Giacomo Peretti? Doesn't look like it yet. He's on the outside. You're going to have to tuck back in, Mikael. There's no grip out there.
He lost his momentum.
Yeah, they start to come onto the final lap of the race. But Mike Noble, he's about to finish the race. Fantastic drive from him. Nothing short of excellent. And he will come to make it 2 from 2 for the start of the season. Brilliant show from Mike Noble. We're going to get a replay here. Is this Mikael Sundstrom? Having a look on Giacomo Peretti. He's going to be on the outside again. Mikael Sundstrom, there's just no grip on that outside line to try and make an overtake. And Peretti knows that all too well.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's watched car after car try and make the same manoeuvre at various different turns on the circuit, and he is seemingly impervious to it. I've never really sort of seen another driver, as it looks like, is he going to get it done now? As he try to get through the chicane? But again, it's an outside line, and Peretti, as I said, he is impervious to it. You know, I've never seen a driver that's been under so much pressure, and they just seemingly continue on their line, and it doesn't really seem to affect them, and that's a rare thing to see indeed, as he's now making his way around into the right-hand turn that we've got here, and Sundstrom really has lost a lot of his momentum now, and I'm not entirely too sure we've got enough of a lap for him to catch. But with these two, there's no point in trying to make any predictions, because Sundstrom will definitely prove us wrong, I'm sure, by the end of the race. And if he can build a little bit of momentum through this right-hand turn, not cost himself too much on the exit, as he has to work the wheel quite a little bit there, and we've got 2 hairpin turns now. And Peretti really just has to park his car on the inside of the line, and I just don't think Sundstrom's going to be able to build the momentum over the line to take that place from him.
So into the final corner and out of the final corner, and Giacomo Peretti will maintain himself in 7th place. So your running order: Mike Noble, the winner; Martin Lawrence in 2nd; Bart Matcher picks up a podium with Peter Roche in 4th; Alessandro Porta finishes 5th; Jesperi Hilacalio and Giacomo Peretti 6th and 7th; Mikael Sundstrom 8th; Gergo Panka in 9th; and Jarkko Torvinen rounds out the top 10. It wasn't the most exciting race in terms of overtakes, but there was plenty of action in terms of mistakes on track, plenty of battles going on, and well, definitely a challenging race for all of the drivers involved here today.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic introduction to Porsche Cup racing here at RCI. I really enjoyed that race. It was a privilege to commentate on it. It was difficult to keep up with what was going on at times, with cars facing left, right and centre the entire way for 60 minutes of that race. But yeah, thanks very much for having me along, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome to have you here, Simon. And as you can see, the final order now. Just give you guys a quick reminder that everything here at Racing Club International is possible through the help of RaceDepartment AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Next Level Racing. If you're looking for some driver coaching to improve your sim racing lap times, you can check out Raceface Speed Labs. They offer some excellent coaching from the likes of Jordan Sherritt and Bruno Cadili, who have real-world experience and obviously very, very quick in ACC as well. Next Level Racing, they can hook you up with all of your sim racing needs. Whether you need a desk stand or whether you need a full cockpit, they can help you out. So definitely check them out as well. Motion simulators and plenty of other incredible goodies at Next Level Racing. And I think they'll probably be having some form of sale on fairly soon, with Black Friday and Christmas around the corner. Meanwhile, from all of us here at Racing Club International, thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed the stream, do make sure to hit subscribe and like. It really, really does help us out. We do have the YouTube membership feature working now. So if you do like what we do and you want to support us even further, you can hit the join button and subscribe to us through the membership system. But of course, none of that is necessary, and it's all only there if you wish to see more support for us in the future, because we really do appreciate it. But from myself here in the commentary box with Simon and Stewie behind the cameras, all the stewards here at Racing Club International, and everyone else who makes all this possible, we thank you so much for joining us here, and we will see you next week for round 3 of the RCI Porsche Cup Season 2.
When you feel it's hopeless, when you think that you lost, oh, I will take your hand and we'll rise up from the dust. Oh, here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. All you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up.